You are being taxed for the very fluid of life. Every 30 days, a bill arrives, or perhaps you walk into a store and pay a 3,000% markup for a plastic bottle filled with a substance that falls from the sky for free. The water monopoly has spent over a century conditioning you to believe that clean, drinkable water is a scarce commodity that must be piped into your home by a central authority. They have turned a biological necessity into a permanent, monthly subscription. But look closer at the sky above you. You are walking through an invisible, endless ocean. At any given second, the Earth's atmosphere contains over 3,000 cubic miles of fresh water. It is a reservoir that never runs dry, yet you are taught to fear a water crisis. The industry wants you to believe that atmospheric water generation is a high-tech miracle requiring $5,000 machines and massive power consumption. This is the scarcity deception. By making the solution look expensive, they ensure you stay connected to their pipes. In the restricted Dew Point archives of 1940, I found the blueprints for a device so simple it can be constructed from scrap for less than $2. It requires no electricity, no filters, and no moving parts, yet it can pull gallons of pure distilled water directly from the air, even in the most arid climates. The plumbing cartels and the bottled water giants didn't bury this technology because it failed. They buried it because it was too efficient. You cannot put a meter on the wind. You cannot tax a man for the humidity he harvests in his own backyard. In the mid-20th century, when independent researchers began perfecting the Vortex condenser, the patents were systematically bought and locked in the same corporate vaults as the Earth battery. They want you to believe you are dying of thirst, so you never stop paying the life tax. I recently reviewed a declassified 1960s survival manual used by long-range desert operatives. They didn't carry heavy water tanks. They carried a single $2 sheet of specialized material and used the Vortex principle to create their own wells wherever they stood. It was silent, it was free, and it made the centralized grid irrelevant. They want you to stay dependent on their infrastructure so they can control your very survival. But the sky is an untapped gold mine, and the secret of the air well is about to be revealed. History is not merely a record of what happened, it is a catalog of what was intentionally deleted. To find the solution to modern water scarcity, we do not look to the desalination plants of the future. We look to a forgotten archaeological site in Crimea, 1912. A Russian engineer named Friedrich Zibold discovered something the local authorities couldn't explain: ancient, massive heaps of crushed limestone scattered across the arid hills. These weren't burial mounds or ruins, they were air wells. Zibold realized that the ancient Greeks had mastered a physical law that modern civil engineering has spent a century trying to ignore. He replicated the design, building a massive stone condenser. On a dry, hot summer day, with no rain in sight, Zibold's air well began to weep. It didn't just produce a trickle, it generated over 360 liters or 95 gallons of pure cold water every single day. The physics of the phase shift. The industry wants you to believe that water generation is a power-hungry process. They want you to pay for the electricity to run a compressor. But Zibold proved that the atmosphere is a giant heat exchanger. The secret lies in the dew point and radiative cooling. When warm, moisture-laden air is forced through a specific geometry of high surface area materials, like crushed stone or specialized mesh, it undergoes a phase shift. As the material cools below the ambient air temperature during the night, the moisture is squeezed out of the air. MW equals HCA times PV minus PSAT, where MW is the mass of water collected, A is the surface area, and PV minus PSAT is the vapor pressure differential. By maximizing the surface area and utilizing the natural thermal mass of the Earth, you can create a permanent water engine that runs on nothing but the rising and falling of the sun. The Great Dehydration. If this technology worked in 1912, why are we paying for plastic bottles in 2026? The answer lies in the 1940s infrastructure boom. As cities expanded, the centralized grid model became the primary tool for social control. Governments and private corporations realized that if citizens could harvest their own water from the air, the water rights industry, a trillion-dollar global market, would collapse. In the archives of the early mid-century plumbing unions, I found records of standards and regulations that were specifically drafted to outlaw decentralized water harvesting. They labeled air wells as a public health hazard, claiming the water was unfiltered, despite the fact that atmospheric water is naturally distilled and cleaner than most groundwater. They didn't ban the technology because it was dangerous, they banned it because it was independent. Zibold's original well eventually fell into disrepair, and the blueprints were buried under a mountain of civil engineering regulations. The industry spent millions to convince the public that water must come from a pipe treated with chemicals and sold at a premium. They turned a free gift of the atmosphere into a taxable commodity. But the ancients knew better, and as I will show you, the vortex geometry they used can be replicated today using common household materials for less than the price of a single gallon of premium bottled water. The industry doesn't just want to sell you water, they want to sell you a chemical enclosure. If you look at the municipal water reports published by any major city, you will see a list of approved additives: chlorine, fluoride, ammonia, and aluminum sulfate. They tell you these are for your safety and dental health. This is the public health placebo. In the restricted toxicological archives of the 1950s, I found the true origin of mass water fluoridation. It wasn't about your teeth, it was about the disposal of industrial hazardous waste from aluminum and fertilizer production. They turned a costly waste problem into a mandatory public service that you pay for every month. The subscription to poison. When you drink from the city tap, you are participating in a multi-billion-dollar chemical experiment. The water monopoly understands a fundamental psychological truth. A population that relies on a central source for its most basic biological need is a population that can be managed. If they control the tap, they control the chemistry of your body. Look at the cost of reverse osmosis or distillation systems sold in big box stores. They are priced at $500 to $1,500. They want to make purity a luxury. By making clean water expensive to produce at home, they ensure that the average citizen remains tethered to the municipal pipes. They have successfully commodified the very molecules of your existence. The Vortex solution: purity through physics. The Vortex well represents the ultimate breach of the chemical enclosure. Unlike city water, which travels through miles of lead or plastic pipes and sits in stagnant reservoirs, atmospheric water is born from the phase shift. When moisture condenses from the air using the vortex principle, it is naturally distilled. It contains no fluoride, no chlorine, no pharmaceutical runoff. It is the highest quality of water available on the planet, produced by the same physics that powers the clouds. The elite have their private springs and high-end filtration. I am giving you the physics to harvest that same purity for the cost of a scrap piece of copper and a plastic cone. The industry is terrified of the $2 harvester. Why? Because it requires zero chemicals. You cannot treat the air with fluoride. You cannot chlorinate the wind. A citizen who harvests their own water is a citizen who has opted out of the chemical social contract. In the 1970s, a small group of independent hydrologists discovered that vortex-cooled water actually had a different molecular structure, often referred to as structured water, which improved cellular hydration. The report was suppressed within months of its circulation. The water cartels cannot monetize a liquid that heals you. They can only monetize a liquid that keeps you dependent. They want you to believe that pure water is a product you buy from a brand. I am showing you that it is a right of the atmosphere. They have spent $100 million to keep you looking down at their pipes, while the solution has been floating above your head the entire time. The water monopoly wants you to believe that extracting moisture from the air requires a $5,000 atmospheric water generator powered by a massive electrical grid. They want to make independence look like an expensive hobby. But as I opened the 1940s dew point files, I realized that the physics of hydration is so simple it can be mastered for less than $2 in common scrap materials. The materials, the $2 inventory. To build a vortex well, you do not need a factory. You need materials that the industry considers waste. 1. The thermal radiator, metal mesh, or copper scraps. A small roll of aluminum or copper mesh or even discarded copper piping. This material must be highly conductive to achieve thermal lag. 2. The vortex cone, A dark-colored plastic or metal cone. Dark colors absorb and radiate heat faster, which is the engine of the phase shift. 3. The collection vessel, a glass or food-grade plastic. The protocol, thermal lag and the night sky. The industry ignores the most powerful cooling system on the planet, deep space. Through a process called radiative cooling, any object pointed to the clear night sky will lose heat until it is colder than the surrounding air. This is the engine that the utility companies don't want you to utilize. 1. The geometry. Place the metal mesh inside the dark cone. The cone must be shaped to channel the night breeze in a swirling vortex motion. This increase in air velocity lowers the local pressure, which in turn lowers the temperature required to reach the dew point. 2. The insulation. Insulate the collected vessel by burying it slightly in the earth. This keeps the collected water cold and prevents re-evaporation. 3. The placement. Position your harvester in a location with high airflow but protected from direct sunlight during the day. The formula of distillation. As the warm night air enters the cone, it hits the metal mesh, which has been cooled by the radiative effect of the sky. The temperature drop triggers a physical transformation. T dew equals T minus 100 minus RH over 5, where T is the ambient temperature and RH is the relative humidity. In most climates, a drop of only 10 to 15 degrees is enough to begin the weeping process. The moisture clings to the mesh, forms droplets, and gravity pulls it down into the vessel. It is not just water, it is naturally distilled water, purified by the same physics that creates the morning dew. I have seen records of field-expedient wells producing over 2 liters of water per night from a single $2 setup. To the industry, this is insignificant, but to the sovereign individual, this is life. By connecting 5 of these small Vortex cells in a backyard array, you generate enough pure drinking water for a family without ever turning on a tap or buying a bottle. They want you to look down at their pipes waiting for permission to drink. I am telling you to look up at the sky. The atmosphere is your reservoir, and the vortex is your key. The water monopoly is finally losing its grip. By mastering the phase shift and the vortex principle, you have done more than just harvest a few gallons of liquid. You have reclaimed the most fundamental biological right in existence. You have stepped out of the chemical enclosure and into the realm of the hydrated sovereign. The Hydration Manifesto, preserving the life force. The industry relies on stagnation. They pump water into massive open reservoirs where it sits for months, growing algae and bacteria, which then requires massive doses of chlorine to fix. This is the cycle of decay. When you harvest your own water from the air, you are dealing with a living substance. To maintain its purity for years, you must follow the sovereign storage protocol. 1. The copper ionization. Store your harvested water in glass containers with a small piece of pure, clean copper at the bottom. The oligodynamic effect ensures that even at low concentrations, copper ions, Cu+2, destroy the cellular walls of bacteria and viruses. 2. The dark storage. Keep your reservoir in a cool, dark place. Light is the catalyst for biological growth. By removing the photon energy, you hibernate the water, keeping it shelf-stable indefinitely. 3. The aeration. Before drinking, pour the water between 2 vessels several times. This re-oxygenates the liquid, restoring the vortex energy and the crisp mountain stream taste that municipal pipes have filtered out. The death of the utility meter. The archives prove that scarcity is a manufactured concept. They tell you there is a water crisis because they cannot control an abundance. They want you to live in fear of a dry tap so you never question the grid. But a family with 5 Vortex wells in their garden is a family that can survive a drought, a blackout, or an economic collapse. You are no longer a customer waiting for permission to survive. You are an independent node in a decentralized network of life. The life tax ends here. The next archive, the $3 fuel hack. You have shelter, you have power, you have water, but the old system still controls your movement. The oil cartels have spent billions to ensure you believe that an internal combustion engine must run on high-priced refined petroleum. They have buried the 1970s hydrogen injection files, a $3 mechanical modification that allows any standard gasoline engine to use water as a supplemental fuel source, increasing mileage by 40% and slashing emissions to nearly zero. I have uncovered the blueprints for the vapor carburetor. In our next session, I will show you how to turn your car into a water breather for the price of a sandwich. The Vortex well file is now sealed. I am Professor Lawrence, and this knowledge is now yours.